Hi, this is TOSIN Abasi, and you're watching the Guitar Mania channel.
Welcome to Vienna. It's great that you're back at the Austrian stage. I understand you played at the Chelsea in 2011 last time.
Yeah. Maybe 2012, but yeah, it's been a few years.
Yeah. You've since released a new album, The Joy of Motion.
Yep.
Can you tell us about the title of the new album?
The Joy of Motion kind of came as a realization to me when I was playing guitar and actually looking at my hands and realizing that there's so much motion involved in producing notes on the guitar, as well as music being an actual physical phenomena of waves traveling through air, vibrating the eardrum. Music also is a real-time phenomenon. Like, you either have to play a recording or you have to perform it to experience it. So it's something that's taking place in real time, in motion. So it just seemed like playing guitar is like a celebration, the joy of motion. You know, the outcome is music, but there is a physical reality to it. So I just kind of like that as like a concept.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to write the songs, and how did you approach the songwriting?
The songs have all kind of existed loosely as guitar parts for a while. Some of the material is quite a few years old. Some of the material is old enough to have been on the first the first Animals as Leaders album. Just didn't make the final cut, yeah. So I'm always writing. And then when it's time to record an album, it's a matter of refining the loose ideas and turning the compositions into complete compositions.
Because you said some of the stuff was meant for an early album. Does it sometimes take time for an idea to mature?
Yeah, sometimes I have a portion of an idea and it just never completes itself until quite a while later. I never try to force it, and honestly, what ends up on an album, it's not arbitrary, but it is a matter of like, oh yeah, let's do this song, but there might be 5 other songs we could have chosen. So it's just, I don't know how we do it, I guess.
Yeah, in terms of recording the album, what is your approach? Do you have a home studio? Where you prepare ideas and where you then use ideas from what you recorded that end up on the album, or is it like you start from scratch in the studio?
This particular album, we worked with a few different producers. Misha Mansour, who worked with me on the first Animals as Leaders album as a producer and co-writer, I wanted to work with him again, and he and I did about 7 songs together. So what I did is I took my guitar parts and presented them to him, and I was like, maybe these 3 or 4 belong in a song. We would track that into a recording session, and then we would construct the song internally within the computer there. And then this would exist as a demo that the rest of the band would listen to and have input, knowing that later we were going to re-record it, the final version, with real drums and new guitar takes and everything.
Yeah. What in terms of guitar takes? Do you decide right from the start? Do you know which guitar is playing which part, or does that evolve?
It's a pretty logical process. We try to structure the guitar parts to fill the spectrum. So maybe I have a single note idea, then we would want something chordal played on the other guitar. Or sometimes we do things, if there's something very rhythmic and staccato happening, we might use like an ambient pad, guitar based, to fill the space. So it's just kind of like an aesthetic approach, however you want that song to go. There's riffs that if I played them without distortion, and if the drums were doing something different, they would totally convey a different emotion and vibe, versus if I'm using distortion and we're using very aggressive drums. So yeah, it's all like an aesthetic choice at the point where you want the song to go.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the style of your style of playing. I mean, you mentioned percussive. I mean, your playing is very percussive. It has elements like slapping, bass playing.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from? Where did and then the second question would be, was the 8-string guitar then the solution to your answers, like so that you could realize what you had in mind musically?
I started playing extended range guitar, going from 6 to 7 after I'd been playing guitar for like 5 years or so. So on the 7-string, I was experiencing a creative an invigoration. For some reason, having an extra string, I was writing all these new riffs, and the guitar just felt kind of fresh. So then at that point in time, I was in a band with a guy named Evan Brewer, who's a bassist and a phenomenal technician. He everything from economy picking to tapping to slap or thumping, as it might be called, as far as my approach is concerned. So it was my exposure to his playing, which I think is from the school of Reggie Wooten and Victor Wooten. They've kind of had a few students who they've imparted this technique to. Evan was one of them. So then I'm in a band with this guy who's doing all this stuff that I've like never seen before, and I was just like really curious about learning. So he's the guy who showed me how to do it. And then obviously the 7-string guitar, it facilitates that percussive element better because of the lower range. And then going to the 8-string just allowed me to even get closer to a deeper, more impactful percussive sound. And as far as tapping, and you have more strings, it allows you to, it just gives you more options. So it's all been like a kind of natural progression.
Yeah, and can you tell us, the people that don't play 8-string guitars, how you tune your guitar?
I'm actually tuned in standard A440, and if you've ever played a 7-string guitar, you'd have a B string below your E, or this is what standard is considered. It's the same relationship between B and E here. I have B and E here. But then for my guitar, I tune the 8th string down to E. So normally this would come in an F sharp. I go down a full step because it allows me to achieve a chord in just one bar position. I can utilize all 8 strings in one. The root is aligned, in one bar as opposed to being shifted a full step down.
And how much did you have to adjust mentally in exploring the new harmonic possibilities? I mean, is it an ongoing process presumably, or? Yeah,
it's still a guitar. Like I said, it's in A440, so like I can play Beatles on this or AC/DC's. It would be the same, but then there is this potential to go lower and this potential to create chords that are a bit wider in their frequency range. I've always been a very experimental guitar player, only because I spent a lot of time not knowing anything about the guitar. So I was self-taught in just exploring sounds on my own. So I actually still do that today. I just like the spontaneity of, inspiration. Whatever happens when it happens. It's not like I'm very structured with my approach to creativity. I just, whatever I'm inspired that day, and 8 strings, there's a lot of potential surprises.
Yeah, because you mentioned frequencies before, did you have any difficulties in the sound being replicated on amplifiers, particularly when with lots of distortion? Was that ever an issue with an 8-string guitar?
It's a common question and it's logical. We don't do anything different to produce our tones with the 8-string. It's not like we're using subwoofers or bass gear or anything like that. It's actually surprising the frequency range of the average vintage 30 speaker. It goes quite low as well as quite high. It's not a full range flat response speaker, but you can actually produce quite a bit of low end. And we don't enhance low end. The string inherently sits at a lower frequency. So what we do is we still treat it like a mid-range instrument. So the mid-range is prominent. And as far as distorted tones with the 8-string, you can get away with using less drive because the string is actually producing such a strong output because there's so much girth there. So it actually sounds cool to get away with a slightly driven sound because then you hear the growl of the string. It's not saturated to the point where you don't hear the dynamics of the string. We kind of try to use as little gain as possible so that you actually hear this rattling, sort of stringy timbre. It's really gratifying.
I've heard that AC/DC are doing the same. I mean, they're losing very little gain, and that really results in their rhythm guitars having that punch. Really, would you agree with that?
Yeah, their tone, you know, definitely is like I would call slightly driven in it. It definitely provides this crunch and this cut. Obviously, I have tones that are more saturated for my leads as well, but when the lower we go, and especially with the slap stuff, it's almost as if you took a Marshall and you're not using much preamp gain at all, but you've got it turned up really loud at the master, you know.
Right. Tosin, when I came in to set up the camera, you were just warming up, or what were you playing? Was it the classical piece, or?
Yeah, some Barrios. Yeah, he's one of my favorite classical composers. I mean, as far as the guitar is concerned, but it's also really, really useful as a warm up because of the fingerings kind of involved, you know. So.
Right. Do you sight read? Can you sight read?
I can sight read. I sight read classical music better than I do contemporary. I find that positionally, classical music oftentimes works off of arpeggiated chords in a position, and it's easier just for me to work it out. But I don't read very often, and so I'm not very good at it. Yeah, it's not a. It was a thing. I went to a music school for a year, and so it was required. But I'm a slow reader, and it's just kind of frustrating. So. Yeah.
And that raises also the question: where do you get your inspiration from? Is classical music something that you're heavily into, or is it?
Not really. There's a certain rigidity with classical music that I just can't seem to escape. Like, obviously there's a wider range of composers, and maybe I haven't been exposed to the more innovative ones, but I always gravitate towards the guys who are incorporating harmony that seems to sit closer to jazz, or it's modal, you know. A lot of classical doesn't have extensions in the chords, you know, it's just, you know, kind of triad based, you know, natural minor, harmonic minor. And I just really find that it's more stimulating for me to listen to kind of modern bebop as far as like when I want to get my fix of complex harmony.
So who would you listen to then?
I'm big into Kurt Rosenwinkel, Adam Rogers, and Jonathan Kreisberg, Alan Holdsworth. There's a guy named Tigran Hamasyan. He's a pianist, Armenian piano player, but he's using a lot of harmony that I haven't encountered even in jazz, and it might be maybe there are ethnic-based scales that he's using, and then the rhythmic vocabulary he has is really cool too. So it's kind of that's where I've been.
Did you ever think of venturing into microtone territory like Dave Friczynski played in Vienna the other night?
Really?
Yeah.
I have not developed my ear to the point where I find that to be a pleasing sound. So I'm still struggling with Western harmony. Yeah.
Tosin, can you tell us a bit about your guitar?
Sure. This is the TAM 100 TOSIN ABASI model. I love this guitar. It is a basically you have a Wenge neck with Babinga reinforcement strips and a basswood body, and the body is actually thinner than the standard RG body. The neck is quite a bit thinner as well, and it's unfinished, so you just have a satin sort of polish on it. It's not anything like a lacquer, so it feels like wood, you know. And then it's a quilted maple top that has a matte, transparent, bluish, inky gray, which I think is a really unique look. And gold hardware. These pickups are called ionizers. They're my signature pickups that I designed with Steve Blucher at DiMarzio, and he's done pickups for all, you know, Steve Vai, Satriani, Paul Gilbert, everyone. So his expertise was really handy in creating like exactly what I needed. They're almost a moderate output pickup that has a voicing that's kind of similar to a single coil. So there's a bit of brilliance dialed in and pick attack that's kind of emphasized. This single coil pickup is activated whenever I'm in the second and fourth positions out of the 5-way switch. So in this position, you just have the humbucker. If I flip the mini toggle, you have just a single coil. If I go into the second position, you activate this inner coil and the single coil here, which gives you like a out of phase tone, but the output is higher because you're incorporating this other pickup. Here in the center, you have both humbuckers. If you flip the mini toggle, then you have both humbuckers split, so you have the inner coils, yeah? If you go to this position, you have these two coils, which is almost like a Telecaster tone, like a beefy single coil. And then here you have this humbucker. The mini toggle switch up, you have the inner coil of this humbucker.
How many times during a gig do you change really?
A ton. I have certain tones that are totally dependent on a pickup position. And when I'm doing slapping, it's always in one of these out of phase positions because it creates, it kind of scoops the mid range and the bass becomes prominent as well as like the brilliance in the high end, and you get this like perfect attack for slap. And I find that it really is helpful for tapping as well because the attack is emphasized. If I'm sweeping, I'm going to be in the neck position. Rhythm tones occur here. My leads, so yeah, you'll see me doing this a lot during the set.
Do you use the volume?
Yeah,
too, or?
I do for swells. I have like a Alan Holdsworth style, very chorusy, totally wet with reverb sort of. It almost sounds like a synth pad, and I could have it do an auto swell or something internally, but I just like to do it with the knob. And I use my tone knob because I'll take my basic clean tone, I'll roll it down almost all the way off, and then it sounds like my favorite bebop sort of sound.
So it's actually not a requisite, it's actually something that you really use.
Yeah, everything on this guitar I use, and I wanted to do a signature that actually you could pull it off of the rack at the music store, and it's the same thing I use. There's no modifications that I need. It's exactly the same.
Tosin, let us turn briefly to developing your skills as a musician. I mean, you're such an accomplished player. For young people who want to pick up the guitar, want to learn the guitar, what approach should they take? Where should they start? What should they focus on?
I guess consistency in your practice is important, and proper practice. So there's a difference between just noodling and having fun and actually working on your weak points and developing new skills. So recognizing that distinction is important because it makes your time more efficient. You realize at least you can acknowledge when you're actually not practicing. There's a value to just playing, but that if we're going to call it practice, then it should be a developmental process that's specific. So that would be one thing I would say. Other than that, don't be afraid to get a teacher because there's a lot of information, and especially now with the internet, you can overwhelm yourself with the amount of information that's available to you on your own. Some people are very good at teaching themselves, and some people would benefit from having a teacher kind of channel all this information into a structured stream for them to incrementally absorb, as opposed to just, oh, I want to learn a mode, I want to learn polyrhythms, I want to learn voicings. And so patience and help can be really valuable. Yeah, at that point, the best thing you can do is to play with others, learn as many songs as possible, and try to get them worked up to where they sound satisfactory, and just playing, getting the feel of the guitar intuitively under your hands. From there, you can start to refine this by maybe you want to play faster, or maybe you want to tap. Then you can start saying, okay, now I'm going to do an hour of this, I'm going to do an hour of that, because you've already foundationally built up the ability to simply play. So if you're a basic beginner, just gratify yourself by producing music. Learn your favorite songs, and
If you were to give one piece of advice to a young aspiring musician, what would that be?
Embrace your originality.
Cool. Cool. Tosin, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate all the best for the remainder of the tour.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.